Boom. Hey, welcome to Creative Block. We're your host, Gene.
And we interview people in the animation industry about their life, work, and hobbies while we doodle jam.
We asked people on Twitter if they had specific topics they wanted us to discuss, as well as some drawing prompts.
And today with us, we have Dave
Hello,
Schlafman.
everybody.
Woo!
Hi, Dave.
Hello. Hey, Gene. It's
How's it going?
good to reconnect after all these years.
It's been a while. Yeah, we were just talking about how we had spoken on the phone like 8 years ago, and I was hoping to work for CloudKit. I don't remember what happened. I think I got busy and something. I don't know.
I don't know, but I mean,
But
your work was so it was so iconic then. Like you had such a perspective then that it, like, just Gene Goldstein. It's like, yeah, it's that guy. Like all through following you on Twitter. And all over these years, it's like I still remember that conversation. So you left a good impression on me.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, man. No, I've always been aware of you, and like you've had such a crazy career track. Like, yeah, you started a studio called Cloud Kid, and I used your plugins like a lot. Like the plugins you guys were putting out were so helpful for Flash, which is now Animate, I guess.
Yeah.
And now you're at Netflix Interactive. There's stuff in between. I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so tell us who you are and what you do.
Yeah. So my name's Dave Schlafman. I'm currently director of design at Netflix. And my team and I are focusing on building new types of experiences on Netflix. And so how can we give storytellers new tools to tell stories they've never been able to tell before? And then that's our mandate. So it's been amazing. But the way I got here is super, super unique in kind of, I like branches and just, it's like, I've had a very weird career growth, but at the same time, it makes a lot of sense for what I'm doing today.
Yeah, careers are always weird, huh? there's no like straight line. It's all just zigzags and loop de loops.
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I still am like, how did I get here from like doodling to now working at the intersection of technology in design, in animation, and content production? It's like all started just from like bad doodles in my sketchbook.
Yeah. Well, you are an artist, and yeah, let's talk about that. So, like, when did you start kind of getting into art, and what were your like goals initially when you were kind of growing up?
So I grew up in the 80s, and I lived in LA actually for a couple of years when I was like 3, 4, and 5. And I'll never forget in 84, so I was about 5 years old. I had an older sister, and she watched MTV all the time. And Michael Jackson's Thriller came out, and obviously it was this huge cultural moment that left this like massive impression on me as a kid. But it wasn't the video, even though the video is iconic and I love the song. I was a huge Michael Jackson fan as a young kid. It was actually the making of Michael Jackson Thriller.
Oh, interesting.
John Landis was the director, and it was basically this like 30-minute, 45-minute documentary of how they produced Michael Jackson Thriller. And as a 5-year-old, seeing like Rick Baker do the makeup and the choreography of the dances and, just how they put it all together, even as a 5-year-old, I remember that was the moment in my life where I was like, I want to make shit at 5 years old. And so from there, I just remember as a kid, drawing all the time. I was the kid that drew on everything. I didn't pay attention in class. I drew on notebooks, drew in my books, was, probably much like the both of you, where I was pegged as like the art kid in my class.
You were the drawer.
Yeah, I was the drawer. So from there, I mean, honestly, just like cartoons were just a part of my life. Like every day after school, because we didn't have Netflix where you could come home and pick whatever you wanted to watch. It was like you would get home from school, 2:30 school would end. I would come home, I would turn on the television and watch Disney Afternoon. So it was a lineup of, Tailspin, Darkwing Duck, Gummy Bears, and then the crown jewel, of course, was DuckTales. And so I think, just constant diet of cartoons, Saturday morning cartoons, Looney Tunes, Mickey Mouse Christmas. There's a famous short with Huey, Dewey, Louie, and Donald with the snowball fight. I probably watched that 100 times, maybe 1,000 times as a kid. So very much burned into my youth and DNA was watching cartoons.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. And so then, like, what kind of led you? Where did you go to art school, or did you go to art school?
So I did go to art school, but it's interesting. So I did well in high school, and art was always kind of secondary. So, I was into, I ran track, and, I was like a typical high school, but on the side I would draw. None of my friends were artists, but I always on like weekends and stuff, I still always kept a sketchbook. And I was, I won art awards in high school, but I wasn't serious about it. And so I graduated high school and I was like, well, I can't go to art school, because if you go to art school, what the hell are you going to do after art school? And so I went to liberal arts school for a year, and I was studying political science or psychology. And at the end of the year, I basically worked at a summer camp in was running the arts and crafts program. And so I was just drawing all day, every day. And this story is going to sound so awful. I went to see the movie Hercules with the camp, and I'm like sitting in the movie theater in Hercules. It's just like, I don't know why these moments, it's like these moments pick you. You don't pick of like the thing that has that moment. But Hercules sitting there in the theater was like, I want to make cartoons. I was like,
that's great.
This is what I was meant to do. And the next day I called my dad from the camp and said, Dad, I'm not going back to college.
Damn. Wow.
And he's like, what do you mean? And I said, well, I've decided I'm going to take a year off, make a portfolio, and I want to go to art school. And he was super supportive. And so I ended up doing night classes at Massachusetts College of Art and Design in Boston. It's actually started a small animation program while I was there. And so then I was at Mass Art, and I studied animation because I had extra credits. I was able to study animation, and then also this funky major called SIM, which is the Studio for Interrelated Media. So, so yeah. So I did, and my art school experience was amazing. SIM was such a weird major. Actually, people working in the industry, went to Mass Art. So Alex and Lindsay Small-Butera went to Mass Art. Casey Leonard, who's at Nickelodeon, supervising producer on the upcoming Rugrats show, was supervising director on Breadwinners. There's actually a pretty good contingent of Mass Artians out in the world right now, animation world thriving. So, so that was cool. But in college, I was in this major called SIM, and the idea is you come up with a concept, and then you find the best medium to express that idea. So it was everything from musicians to spoken word artists to crazy performance artists to people building installations to filmmakers and everything in between, computer programmers. And so I dabbled in kind of everything, and it was super collaborative. And it was okay, I'm not the best musician, so I'm going to make a film and then go find a friend to go make music for my film, or I'm producing a show and I'll design the flyers, but then I need somebody to do the tech or, get the lineup together. And so it taught me as an artist to be super scrappy and kind of find people that are so much better than I am at things. And so
yeah, that's the trick to it.
It was awesome. It was again, yeah. I loved my art school experience.
That's good. We don't hear that often enough.
Yeah, that's true. And that's really interesting to hear, kind of that you went to a school that is not the typical animation school, right? It was a little bit more interconnected between, or from what you're saying, it sounds like it's a little bit more interconnected between all the majors.
Well, so this program is unique. So I also double majored in animation. In my
Mm-hmm.
graduating class, I graduated in 2004, long time ago. And, this was before Facebook and Twitter and
Right.
YouTube. I mean, this is like, feels like the Stone Age of kind of where everybody is now. But one thing that was cool is we were the first class of animators to graduate for mass art. And so I did kind of the more commercial track for animation of, making films. How do you market yourself, put together a portfolio? And then sim was kind of this radical kind of like more art school mentality of hack and mess around and come up with crazy ideas and then put them out in the world. So it kind of in a way complements, again, my path to where I am now at Netflix kind of sits right in between those two worlds.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
Right.
Yeah, I've never heard about that program, so that's definitely good to put out there.
I don't know. I also feel like maybe I
Yeah.
loved my art school experience because it was, I knew this is what I wanted to do. And so it was, and I went to liberal arts school and it was like, fuck that, not that, this. And so I was there to just like make stuff and,
Yeah, yeah. Having a goal is good.
I do feel like, yeah, having that moment when I don't know, when you have like the earliest someone can have like that eureka moment that it's like, okay, this is what I'm gonna commit to do. It makes it like a lot more fun and enjoyable to actually like study whatever it is that one person has like picked, right? Like, whereas like going there because it's like, oh, I guess we're supposed to go to animation school if we want to do animation, right? Like that's like a very different mentality.
Totally. But
Yeah.
like, here's the thing, because sim was this kind of like misfit major, I was in classes with people that were like doing really like poetic and thoughtful and experimental work. And here I was on the side, like drawing a bunch of fucking doodles. And so I was super self-conscious where I was trying to say like,
Oh, yeah.
is this art? And I was like struggling internally. So I was trying to do experimental projects. And finally I wasn't super secure of like, okay, there is just like, I can use my doodles to tell stories. There was still that struggle in myself. So even though I had that eureka moment watching Hercules, as awful as it sounds.
No, dude, Hercules is great. I love Hercules. I don't think that's
Yeah.
bad at all.
No. I still have a warm place in my heart for Hercules. Anyways,
Yeah, Hercules. I watched it recently.
it's pretty good. It's good. I like it. Danny DeVito.
Oh, yeah.
Who doesn't love Danny DeVito?
I don't know. Awful people.
But anyways, yeah. So I struggled, and then it was like, so it wasn't like I had everything figured out. And then a huge changing point is I read a book. I believe the fellow's name is Alan Newworth. Wrote a book called Making Tunes, and again, this was like, if you wanted to learn about animation, you couldn't just go on Google and like search everything, And so it was this book that kind of took you through the shows of the time, like creator driven shows. I remember reading that book and it would say like, basically took the production process of like development all the way through like show launch. And you took a piece like pitching, and it was like the Powerpuff Girls story of how Powerpuff Girls got made, and it started as the Whoop-Ass Girls. And so it was like, oh, that's cool. And then it took like character design, and it was like, Dexter's Lab. And then another one was like Pilot, and it was SpongeBob SquarePants. And so it was like, I was like, oh man, this is what I want to do. So I was getting stuff outside of my curriculum from school, of just my passion of wanting to make cartoons.
Mm-hmm. So tell us about the transition to starting your own studio and stuff. Like, what was the path that led you there? Because that's lofty. That's like a big thing to undertake.
Yeah. So I would say my early career was, again, kind of winding, and I was very frustrated in that I didn't know what I wanted to do. Even though I was like, oh, I want to make cartoons, I didn't know how to get there. So I actually applied after college to Cal Arts, and I didn't get in, surprise, for grad school. So for experimental animation. And I remember getting the rejection letter, and it was actually this like clarifying moment where it was like, okay, I took a year off from after college. I made a portfolio, applied, got rejected. And I remember going for a run thinking to myself, like, okay, the CalArts thing isn't happening. How the fuck am I going to break into the industry? Like, I remember thinking that. And so I just started, like, I worked in video games at Harmonix for a little bit, worked on Karaoke Revolution as an animator.
Oh, neat.
I then just started directing films and trying to find my voice. I was putting aside 3 and 4 hour sketchbook sessions a day. I was writing. I was just making, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was super poor, basically just finding a way to pay my rent. And then I got an opportunity to redesign and kind of develop characters for Trivial Pursuit for kids. So it was like I got this like nice chunk of money that would fund me for about a year while I was working on this project with Hasbro. And I just started making DVDs and sending them out to like studios. And I got an email back from Soup to Nuts, which was a small studio in Boston. And they were like, hey, we love your stuff. We'd love you to come in. So I actually I got my first animation gig like 3 years after I graduated college. And I was there for 2 years and did everything from character design on Assy McGee. I was assistant director on Word Girl for the first season or two, doing storyboards. And then they'd have RFPs, and I started pitching ideas and concepts for the studio, and actually got to direct about 25 shorts for a PBS kids show called Between the Lions. They were these interstitial shorts from like 1 to 2 minutes long. And so like overnight I was like writing and directing and art directing, and I had a team. And again, it took me back to Sim, where it was like, holy shit, I have like animation designers and character designers and animators who are infinitely more talented than I am. It was amazing. And so I was like, this is what I want to do. And, you know, after 2 years at the studio, I realized that Soup to Nuts, just for whatever reason, it was a subsidiary of Scholastic, the way they were organized. I just didn't feel like it was an artist driven studio. And so I didn't leave with the idea of I'm going to start a studio. I was like, I want to leave to kind of work on my own projects. And then co-created a kids cooking show called Fizzy's Lunch Lab with a friend of mine from Soup to Nuts. And we ended up winning, you know, a very large $500,000 grant from the U.S. Department of Education.
Wow.
Woo.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was like, okay, I guess this has to happen. And so
that's happening.
And so what was cool, it was actually an interactive show. And so I called up my best friend from Mass Art, who is an engineer at Disney Interactive. He moved back, and we started Cloud Kid to produce Fizzy's Lunch Lab and produce the first season of Fizz. Like, okay, people just started, you know, coming to us and saying, hey, we have this project, and we, you know, grew the studio over the course of the next, you know, 6-7 years to almost, you know, 18 full-time employees, 2 part-time employees.
Oh, wow.
Worked with literally hundreds of artists and freelancers and musicians all around the world, producing everything from content to games, apps, websites. And it was great. It's happened so quickly. But then by like 2012, we were like neck deep in like a studio with overhead. These are all the boring words, like cash flow and overhead and line of credit, all the shit I didn't want to do in running a studio, but was still having to do.
Yeah, the business side of it is exhausting. I'm kind of figuring that out right now with some of my own stuff.
Yeah, it's hard, man.
It's a lot. Were you creatively involved in stuff still, or did you kind of get bogged down by the bureaucracy?
No, I mean, I still managed, you know, I think there were definitely some projects where I shouldn't have been as involved as I was. I've learned a lot since then. And then I think I had some of my pet projects. So, you know, I was still pretty involved with Fizzy's Lunch Lab. We ended up going on to make, you know, almost 100 animated shorts for that, you know, 2 to 5 minutes long. Ended up making, you know, 20 games for that project, a website, you know, 100 recipes for each short. and that was like super fun. But then we had, we produced 2 pilots for Nick Digital. One was called Bro Duel, and then the other one was Earth to Allen. I know Louis Zong worked on both of them. They both had like,
I remember them. Yeah,
crazy people worked on them. I mean, just like super talented. John Lauren, who's like has a big following on Twitter. Louis Zong.
I didn't know that he worked on those. That's crazy. I don't think he mentioned that.
Yeah. So,
but I mean, he's done a shitload.
I mean, he's a machine. Yeah. He's like, I actually I like gave him the nickname Boy Genius because he was like 19, graduated college, had like, you could just tell was going to be a superstar. So.
Yeah. I straight up think Louis might be some kind of genius. Like,
me too. Mm-hmm.
You don't produce that much work, and he's got that like weird thing where we're just gushing about Louis.
It's okay. He deserves everything.
Yeah, he doesn't stop to think about what he's doing, which is like, that's, I don't know, to me that's like crazy because I overthink everything, and he just makes shit, and like to me that's the sign of a genius because he's just putting out work. He doesn't care what it is. It's just he's just working, and it's like, that's insane. I don't know. Whoa. Anyway, yeah.
He is. I mean, he's great. He and honestly, like, and yeah. So that was the best part of Cloud Kid, is like the team that we assembled and the people we got to work with. Like, at the end of the day, that's the thing that I still loved about my time running a studio, is just, again, that theme of finding super creative, talented people and how can they elevate everything that you work on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think that when everyone, I feel like I knew a lot of people that would leave college and be like, I'm going to start a studio. It's like a thing that everyone wants to do because everyone wants agency over like their career and their projects. But I think everyone quickly realizes that the task of like maintaining that is like insane. Like it's way more, like you said, it's overhead. It's all these things that are like not fun, and just trying to find projects to stay afloat, and like everything, the bigger you get, the harder it is to maintain.
But we were successful. I mean, that's the thing, is like, I think the highs were so high, right? Like, I think, we were nominated for, like 5 Emmy Awards for different projects. We, had 2 Nick Digital pilots. We had a show in development at Cartoon Network where we got to do the entire, like, production board pitch. It didn't move forward, but it was like, these experiences were amazing, and got to work with just awesome clients. Like PBS Kids was an amazing client. We developed original content for Houghton Mifflin, animated content for Houghton Mifflin, got to work on a animated project with Jason Segel for his book series. So it was like, those highs were amazing, but the challenges of like, literally, I remember we were at this point where we didn't get, like, we didn't get an RFP for a game project. And it was like, can we squeak by over the next month, or we're going to have to lay a couple people off. And like those nights of like laying in bed and like thinking about these people who I genuinely cared about, just the stress of it was a lot.
Yeah, it takes a lot to run a team and run a business. Like it's more than just creativity and like even project management. There's so much more to it. You just gotta have this like ironclad fucking constitution. What kind of ended up turning you off of the idea? Like, because eventually you left Cloud.
Yeah, I mean, again, we had so much success. We were profitable. But what it came down to is a couple things. There were 2 things. One is that in order to grow the studio from, 20 people to 40 people, just was not the problems or the things I wanted to be focusing my time on, right? It was like, I want to be closer to creative. I want to be making stuff. And so that was like a personal thing of mine. I was also working 70-hour weeks. The team wasn't. We actually did like a great job at kind of work-life balance for the team, but my partner and I were working around the clock, and it just, I had my second kid. It wasn't sustainable. And so we were just like, we built this amazing team. Can we get somebody to kind of see the talent here and acquire as much of the team as possible? So we made the decision to just start talking to companies. And we were like, we have this awesome team. We build tools. We understand story. We understand technology. We understand character development. And so we talked to everybody from like 9 Story up in Canada to Tokaboka to Sego Mini up in Canada, app companies. And then Jibo, we knew the founder, Cynthia from the MIT Media Lab, super famous, brilliant roboticist. And they had started Jibo and they were expanding their team. And so they were like, we need people that understand character development and personality development and tools and animation. And so they ended up acquiring, 12 of our staff.
So explain what Jibo is, because people might not
Thank
know.
you. So Jibo is a social robot. So imagine, and again, this was 2016. We closed up shop beginning January of 16. Jibo is essentially an Alexa, but with a personality and a 3-axis motor. So super expressive motion, was designed by this brilliant animator. Actually, Sheridan went to Sheridan up in Canada. His name's Fardad Faridi. Amazingly brilliant animator, designed the actual robot. And so the idea is that instead of this little like plastic tube sitting on your counter, it's actually a imagine like Luxo Jr., who can respond to you and have personality.
Yeah, we'll throw it up on screen so people see what it looks like, because it is very well designed.
It's beautiful. And so that was a fucking trip that year, 14 months that I was there, the team was there, because I think it was, much more of a tech environment where I think a lot of the people from CloudKid added so much personality. And I think Jibo's personality was the thing that I think actually put Jibo on the map and who he was. So I brought in a writer named Adam Shonkoff, who's super funny guy, became the writer for Jibo. Kim Hoy, who's an amazing illustrator, animator. She was a, lead designer there. And so we did bring a lot of creativity to Jibo, but just the technical side, the robot was so just not in a place to be able to do much. So it was a very frustrating year where in animation, you can work really quickly and you can get ideas and you can experience them, even with games, but not robots, man. Those take a long time to build. And so.
What year was this that you guys were working
2016. So the entire year, we signed with Jibo in November of 15. And then I left January of January of 17 to join Netflix. So, but that year was amazing. It was like being at Jibo was one of the most creative years of my life, but also frustrating. Only in that it's like you're making a fucking robot, and it's like how many.
Yeah, that's sick. That's great.
Even though it didn't work, it was awesome.
Yeah, that is really cool. That's such an interesting jump to go from like operating a studio to working on this robot. Like I don't think we're gonna get anybody else that has done that. That's
I know, right? I feel like robots. I love robots. It's like one of my favorite kind of like thing to think about for stories and stuff. So I think that's cool that you actually worked on a real robot.
That's true. And Gene, I know you've probably seen some of my doodles, which I'll give you some if you throw up on the screen. Like,
oh please,
I love drawing robots more than anything in the world, and so I think bringing a object to life that can respond to external stimuli such as sound or motion or is just like, it was amazing. It was so cool.
Yeah, what ended up happening with that project?
So Jibo launched, and part of the reason I left is because I felt like we kept not delivering on our deadlines as a company. And so there was that, and then the price of the robot was $900.
Whoa.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, I felt like, well, at that point,
that's tough.
you're like in like a, you're like buying computers and smartphones and washers and dryers and large screen TVs, but we were expecting people to buy a robot that couldn't do a quarter of what Alexa could do. So
that's like a luxury purchase.
Yeah.
That sucks because I'm sure you guys put a lot of work in, and that's robotics, I guess. It's just
but that's anything, right? Like in some ways, this is why I love animation. I love just create, like the pursuit of, part of being a creator is not the destination, it's the process of going through it and the learnings. And so for me, that's the thing in my career, is like every step has been like, what did I take away from it? How is this making me a better storyteller or artist or thinker? And so Jibo, again, while super frustrating, it's like that. And it's like my, the projects at Nickelodeon that didn't go through, or Cartoon Network development project, like I learned so much from those projects and still have like, there's no bitter feelings. Like I know it's like hitting the lottery, and, so I try to not go in with it as much angst if things don't happen.
You have such a better attitude than I do about all of that.
Well, I guess it's also like, Dave, you've just gone through so many of these iterations, right? Of like so many pitches. You've pitched so much because you've pitched for, like you said, you got a government grant, and then you pitched to like Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon, and basically for even Jibo, you guys were pitching ideas all the time. So I guess like you kind of build that resilience of like pitching.
Yeah, you do. You do. I mean, and it's like, it's like you need a tough skin to be in animation, and it's like, Jorge Gutierrez came. I had Jorge come and speak to the Netflix design team on Wednesday. And, somebody who's like, Jorge, it's like TV show, feature film, he
doesn't
like
stop.
VR. I mean, we're talking like, if anybody has had success, and, even Jorge has had canceled project after canceled project, rejection. Yeah. It's just, it's part of the growth and like learning process. Sucks though. It's definitely, it's not easy.
Yeah. Animation chews you up, and it's, you have to really like be prepared for that. That's something I thought I was prepared for that. I don't know if I was. And whoever's listening, like, if you want to pitch stuff, like, do it, but like, just, I feel like you should always be ready. Maybe this sounds dramatic, but you should always be ready to fail. And I think that like it'll be easier to deal with, and you can just move on if you're not like shooting for everything to be a big success.
The other thing too, I fully agree with Eugene. I would say the thing too that I've seen both earlier in my career is you come up with an idea, and then you like hold on to that idea for so long, and you're like keep revising that idea. Like sometimes just get the learnings from what you learned from that idea and move on. And it's not to say that like don't believe in your idea. It's just like that I can guarantee you your next thing will be better.
That's something that I don't think we've said enough on here, is the like, go ahead, V.
I agree with that a lot, because for me, I relate to that to like the storyboarding process when like, for example, you're trying to board a scene, and then you're doing a lot of thumbnails, but a lot of the thumbnails that you're going to draw, you're going to like scrap anyway. And then you're going to pitch it to your director, and the director is going to like give you notes, and then you're going to like pitch it to like the supervising director and all that. So like there's always like that idea that like you have to be ready for like not everything that you do will be used, but that's good, because usually every single time that you scrap something, you've learned something, and then the next stab at it has more, what's the word, like energy, or just like a better...
There's like a looseness to it. Yeah, you gotta try to stay loose when you're in animation. You gotta, both just like in the day-to-day, but also in like any kind of project. anything you're pitching, whatever, I think it's just better to stay loose.
I agree. And, but here's the thing.
Yeah.
Rejection is never easy. Like, I don't want to say, I'll never forget getting the email from Katie Krentz, who I loved working with at Cartoon Network, where she was like, oh, we all love we loved you guys. We actually think you guys should be working on Cartoon Network shows, but we're passing. And I remember being like, fuck, it's, you feel so close. I know, Gene, you've gone through it. It's like, you feel like there are only so many slots to like even do that. And you get so close. And then it's like, okay, I got to just move on to that next thing. But it's still not easy. Like, I don't want to make it seem like, it was nothing. I was like, okay, what's my next idea? There were some days of looking.
Yeah. Yeah, lots of days.
But it's just like the grief process, right? Or like
it's a grief process.
It's like what the steps? What are the steps? Like 5 of them, like denial, and then like anger, and then like all all of these.
Yeah,
like,
I like that one.
I heard it in your voice. You're like anger.
Anger.
Bargaining, and then all these. It's just like losing an idea is very close to like losing, I don't know, like a pet or some.
Nothing gets lost. I think it's also important is that it's like, it's just that opportunity didn't work out with that studio or whatever, but most of the time, hopefully you can take it elsewhere too.
Oh yeah.
And I'll tell you one more story. Because again, like, it's like, here's this guy that like just easily jumped through his career to like these things. Like, before Fizzy's Lunch Lab happened, I started flying out to LA, right? So this was like right after I left Soup to Nuts. And I'll never forget, I like created this like 2-minute teaser for this alien wrestling show called Alien vs. Alien. And I remember going to Cartoon Network, and at the time, I'm not going to say the executive's name, he's not there anymore. And I remember like meeting with this guy, pitching the show, and he basically was like, and I was like, oh man, what the hell does this mean? And he's like, I hate, basically I'm paraphrasing, but it's kind of burned in my brain. He said, I hate when people fly all the way out to California for this. And I was like, because I flew out from Massachusetts, and it was like, it was this moment where it was like, I could have folded and just been like, I'm not cut out for animation. I can't do it. But instead I was like, fuck, like, I'm not going to let one person, say like, just because this idea isn't great and it wasn't a great pitch, it was like, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to learn. I can't let this guy get under my skin. Even though in the moment it was a brutal, it was one of those things where I feel like my stomach leaked through my toes.
Yeah. Wow, that's a brutal thing to say. Like, do you think that person meant like that it's a lot to put on someone to fly out all the way to LA to like that it's like too big of a gamble, or is it just like, or was it something about that?
It was I think both. I think the quality of where I was just, but he was not like, he definitely meant that. And, it was hard. Like, but again, then I went to Disney in that same trip, and I met with Jay Francis, who's, an executive at Disney, who I was messaging with him 2 days ago, who's, was a mentor of mine for a couple of years, who was super, encouraging through my career. And so it's about finding those development allies, even if you don't land a pitch with them, who are supportive and understand your voice and willing to just hear you out and help you grow. So it's a balance. You're not going to appease anybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a hard pitch that I will never forget.
Oh my god.
So I've had some bad ones. I don't want to say who it is because I actually like them, but I did the same thing where I flew to LA for a pitch, and it was like, you didn't have to fly out here for this, and I was like, I didn't, and they meant well, but it was kind of like, yeah, all right.
Oh, because they like it was implying like, oh, this could have been like a Zoom call kind of thing.
It could have been, yeah. Well, it was a little while ago, but it was, I think I could have just sent stuff in.
I see.
And probably would, I would have gotten the same answer. Me being there didn't help it at all. And so that was disappointing because I thought I was doing the right thing. But that's just,
But I think it's like
you
that's
learn.
something good for like the listeners to hear out. It's
Yeah.
like it's totally cool to like pitch through Zoom or like Google Meet or like
Especially now.
send in. Yeah, because I feel like, I mean, for me as like an international, when I was in France, I actually pitched to a couple of like, I pitched to Frederator, I pitched to Nickelodeon through, well, webcam, because like I wasn't going to fly from France all the way to LA.
No,
and
God, no.
and like I actually at the time, well, I had a pitch. They kind of like were like, we don't know. And I followed up, was like, hey, if you guys have any notes or whatever, just let me know, and I'd love to address them. And they actually gave notes, which I think is something that is I guess like an important thing to say is like, hey, like you might pitch and it might not go well, and like maybe just keep like that's just like a way to break the ice and be like, hey, like we've met, can we talk about cartoons more through email?
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, meeting in person helps because you're building the connection more. So
Oh yeah,
it does. It really does.
So it's up to it's up to whoever is doing the pitching. It's like if you're okay with it being potentially a flop, but as long as you've like try to line up a bunch of things, like at least like I definitely had some other stuff lined up when I came to LA.
I don't know. Jay Francis, I remember early in my time, said it's better to be working at Home Depot in Los Angeles than it is in Boston. And he's from Boston. That always stuck through my head. Even at Cloud Kid, towards the end, we actually, one of our options that my partner and I were kind of working through is, do we relocate Cloud Kid to LA?
Oh, right. That's a big move. Yeah.
But yeah.
So you were you were working on Jibo, and then what kind of led to you working at Netflix?
Yeah, so a friend of mine from kind of PBS Kids circles, the technology side for like kids media, she was director of product innovation at Netflix. And she reached out to me while I was at Jibo and said, hey, Dave, we have this role that I think would be perfect for you. And so I was like, okay, tell me more. And she said, well, I can't tell you what we're working on, but what I can tell you is that it's kind of at the intersection of design, content production, and technology. And we want to give creators a new way of telling stories. And we need you to be able to work with content creators and help them understand how to tell these stories. And so I was like, cool. And she said, and most of the stories we're going to get started with are they're going to be animated. They're going to be cartoons. So I was like, that sounds amazing. And so they flew me out to, the Bay Area where Netflix is headquartered, and, sat in a single room for 8 hours for the Netflix Gauntlet interview process, which was amazing. Actually, it was awesome. There's like brainstorms and it's super creative, super smart people.
Wow.
And they made me an offer. And I was like, this feels like Netflix is a super interesting company trying to do really ambitious things. And so I was like, what the hell? I'm moving to California. So that's how I ended up. And again, it was just, the right time, right place at the right time, where this initiative for interactive content was just getting started, and they were looking for somebody to kind of bring a perspective from the design side who had a content background. And so I was lucky because I wouldn't hire myself right now. Again, hiring people that are better than you, who can amplify what the team is doing. That's, again, a theme that's gone throughout my career. So so now my team is amazing. So now that we've grown a bit and working on a bunch of different stuff, but yeah, it's been awesome.
What was the first project that you jumped on?
So Puss in Book with DreamWorks was already past development. It was in production, and so that was the first one. Buddy Thunderstruck, I was able to work with Ryan Wiesbrock in Stupid Buddy towards the kind of tail end of that. And then I was much more involved on the development side for, things like Stretch Armstrong, The Breakout, and, You vs. Wild and Bandersnatch, Carmen Sandiego, To Steal or Not to Steal. So those ones, because it was just me and a couple other people, I was starting to build out my team. And so now I don't work on anything, unfortunately. Now my role is how do we get better at this? How do we continue to innovate and explore new types of stories, new genres? And so I'm focused, literally my conversations are like, what are we doing in 2023? So it's exciting, where the team is very much like they get to work on all the fun stuff.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, what is sort of your day-to-day, like, what kind of role do you have on the team? Because you're a director, but you're a director of a department, and it's kind of an abstract concept, it almost seems like, where it's like, interactive, and what does that mean within the structure of Netflix? So kind of what do you feel like you do usually?
What do you do? What do you do up there?
Up in that tower.
So it's probably easier to think about what does the team do. So thinking about now what happens when you can have a bunch of different, imagine them as video clips, and you can put an interface on top of that, and the interface can jump to multiple places within those segments, right? And so when you have that technology, what type of stories can you tell? And so the team is focused really on two areas of how can we continue to expand that kind of palette for storytellers, and how do we coach, content creators and give them the skills to tell these types of stories. So we have narrative designers on the team who actually partner with these external content creator teams, and they have brainstorms with them. They onboard them with our tools, and they read scripts, and they're part of the development process and the production process, and throughout from development through launch on our service. So they're designers who are super involved in that content process. And then you have other designers who are focused just on new features of how can Netflix continue to innovate on interactive storytelling and interactive TV.
Mm-hmm. So you guys are kind of taking the tech side and almost acting as a middleman between the creative and the tech. Is that right?
Exactly. Okay. You said it much better than I.
Well, I'm trying to abbreviate. Yeah,
it's perfect.
I just find that so interesting. Yeah,
it is. It is. It's very interesting.
Yeah, I've seen. I don't know how much we can talk about it, but I've been to Netflix and I've seen some of the stuff you guys are working on. I don't know how much you can say about like Battle Kitty or anything, because it's been announced, I think, right?
Yeah, it's been announced. I can't say much, but we are working on Battle Kitty with the brilliant Matt Lazell, and again, dream project. And that's honestly, that's one of the things I love about this initiative, is that you can take somebody like a Charlie Brooker for, Black Mirror. You can take a Matt Lazell, a Tina Fey. We're talking like people that are at the top of their games, DreamWorks, the Boss Baby team at DreamWorks. And you say, okay, here's this new tool set. What do you want to make? Mm-hmm. And that's again, the theme. How do you partner with the best people in the world and give them tools and let them tell the story in a way that you can never tell that story?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm like obsessed with that idea, because I grew up loving video games and animation, and I feel like there's that intersection is like so cool, and just from what I've seen and the stuff that's already out, like there's so much potential there. I think that some people might not understand just how difficult it is to pull that off, because when you have multiple paths, you have to create every single one of those paths. Like every single one of those options has to exist. And so that's twice as much work as it would be if it was just, an hour and a half long movie. You're basically making a 3-hour long movie if it's a movie. And a show, I mean, it's possible that people won't see entire episodes, I think. Like it's a lot. There's a lot of work, but it's such a cool setup, because it's like people get to interact with their media. Like that's so cool.
And I think the hope is that it's more work. And in some ways, there is a part of my team or the team that is focused on what we say like workflow and tools, where they're creating, we've created this tool called Branch Manager that is essentially a tool that you can design a flow, which is essentially the blueprint of a story. You can type in like outline text. Then you can also import scripts from Final Draft. You can import videos. And so this program has made the process so much easier for storytellers so that they can focus on what they know, which is the writing and the producing of the content. It's definitely harder, but we are making a really, we are designing, what that production experience is. So it's easier for these partners. So it's not really like you're producing twice the content. We're trying to find ways that it isn't as laborious as that.
Right. Make it a little more efficient. Yeah. Yeah. I remember after watching Bandersnatch, I think there was some behind the scenes stuff about that. And I was like, my God, that's so much to just like keep track of. But yeah, having those tools probably helps a lot.
It does. It's really amazing how much it does help.
Real quick, we'd love to ask you about Creative Block. That's the name of our show. And how do you deal with it, and how does it look like for you?
It's a great question. So for me, I mean, you can't see my office here, but I have tons and tons and tons of books. I've been off Instagram for about 1.5 years now because I was so honestly, I was so overwhelmed by the amount of talent. I'm being totally honest. Is like,
that's the positive take on it.
There's that, people are like, oh, Instagram's amazing. But then I'm like, well, I have this, 8 to 5, 9 to 6 job where I want to be making more than I am. And then I go on Instagram and it's just like the amount of amazing stuff that's coming out of people right now. And so I've actually found that though that tends to like not inspire me as much. So I still I need that dose of inspiration. So I have a giant book collection of, art of animation books that I still read and look through. And again, I am on Twitter. I look at, again, Louis Zong, huge inspiration of mine. Even like Brandon's little doodles, like your motion comics, like I get those, Chris Eliopoulos, still a huge fan of his work.
Yeah. Chris and I go way back.
But I need to be like, the thing for me is just like consuming other people's stuff and getting inspired, and then just starting to draw and write and doodle in my sketchbook. I've always had a thing saying like, don't be afraid of the blank white page. You can't fear the blank white page, because if you do, like, you're never going to get started. So you just got to dive in and just start doodling.
Right.
That's great advice.
Yeah, that's really true.
It's that anytime I start a new sketchbook, that first page, I used to be afraid of starting a new sketchbook, and I think I've gotten better about it because I'm just like, fuck it, who cares? Who am I impressing? I don't know.
There are actually some sketchbooks where I think on the first page I've done like I'll purposely will write things like a little doodle of somebody looking very worried and saying like, you've already fucked up this sketchbook, or like,
yeah, I did that once too. Yeah.
Purposely scribble and say like the first page is ruined, so
Yep.
And again, I've been drawing more recently on scraps of 8.5 by 11 because it's so non-precious. It's like, I could throw these away, and these are for me in kind of a meditative process of just like starting to do something. Versus being in a sketchbook and feeling like it's too precious. I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's great.
I actually really relate to that with like, I love composition books, like the lined ones, because like, it's the same. It's just like, well, this cost me just like, I don't know, $2 to buy. It's fine. I can rip some pages. It's okay.
Yeah.
And someone on the podcast also before said that they had a teacher that would make them cross out every single page, have like a big cross through the pages, just to kind of like like lower like the value so that you like the artist wouldn't feel as pressured to perform on the pages.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was
I used to be better about that. I used to have I would buy like the little composition books that are like, I don't know, 4x2 or something.
Yeah.
And in college, and I had a stack of those, and I would just like have them with me all the time. They would get so mangled, but I would just do little sketches in them, and I stopped doing that, and I don't know why, because it was like kind of liberating, and I came up with a lot of shit.
I do agree that like having a notebook with you at all time. I feel it. I really feel it as well. Like when I stop doing it, my mood gets down a little bit because I don't feel like I have that space of like, because it's a space that's just for you. So it's kind of like your own like personal private sandbox, which feels really nice.
It is.
It's like a diary. I gotta do that. I gotta start doing that. You're just making me remember how much fun I used to have drawing. I forgot.
I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. Like, I went through last year at the beginning of the pandemic. I went through, and again, I'm happy to send you some of this stuff. I went through like a phase of like drawing and Procreate, and like there was a point where I was just trying to draw with like, no line, because I love my Uniball pens of just like ink and paper. That is like, you can get into this flow of drawing where you can't erase anything, you can't second guess anything. You put down words that are kind of coming from somewhere where you don't really understand, but they end up meaning something, and they end up like helping form an idea. Where in Procreate, everything is undoable, and it's where I feel like I start to kind of self-edit. And so I have recently, over the last month, just started to just like paper and ink, sometimes a black color pencil, Prismacolor pencil. And it's just like, I'm just jamming. Like, this isn't for the internet. Fuck Instagram, fuck followers. This is for me.
Yeah. Just for yourself.
I do agree that like, for some reason, for me, when I try to write dialogue for comics, or when I try to write, it's easier for me to do it on paper, because then I can cross out the bad dialogue. Whereas when I'm in front of like a Google document or on the computer, knowing that I can press the backspace key, I feel like I don't get anything done. I feel like the easier way for me to get stuff out is either just write it out on paper, so then I can have all the different versions of what went through my brain, or use Google like text to voice to text, because then I can just blah, and then I can edit it when I finally got it all out.
I agree. Yeah, so I fully agree.
It's like we said, got to keep it loose.
Yeah.
That's the best way to not get like burnt out and overwhelmed. I should take my own advice.
Gene, I'm gonna haunt you on Twitter and say, show me your composition notebook.
I have such a thing about showing work that's not polished and finished, and then like everyone's like, wow, your stuff's so clean and so great. I'm like, yeah, but I'm so burnt out because I can't let go of that restraint I put on myself, and so I need to work through that. This is my therapy.
I'm the opposite. It's really hard for me.
Yeah, you are.
It's really hard for me to stick to something and make it extremely polished. Like for me, I'm kind of like that like 80%, 20% rule is like, I'm all about the 80%. Like the 20%, I'm like,
Yeah. No, we're complete opposites in that way. It's really fun.
I had a figure drawing teacher in college who changed the way I drew, like fundamentally. Like, I was much more intentional, where it was like, and she was like, loosen up, like your hands should always be moving, your arms should always be moving, and like feel the energy. This is almost as corny as Hercules being my moment of inspiration. But it's like,
not corny.
Like it changed the way where I started to draw with a pen. I couldn't self-edit. It was about the energy of the line. Like, Gene, I bet your stuff would look totally badass if you loosened up.
Yeah, well, you know what's funny is like my sketchbooks are very loose. Like I get into a flow of trying to come up with. Mostly I don't doodle. The only time I like doodle is on this show.
So interesting.
But when I do a lot of concepting because I'm always working on some new show or something. I don't know. and my pages are just the same character over and over again, me just trying to like get the shapes down or come up with a design or layouts or whatever. And it's like, I've shown people, to me that's just how I think. It's just like manic, like fast, you know, like just getting little drawings. I draw really small. I remember Chris Leopoulos used to give me shit for that, because he was like, you got to try drawing big. He's like, you're always drawing these tiny little things. I'm like, yeah, but it just gets the idea out. Like, what's the point of taking up a whole page?
So yeah. So my second biggest breakthrough, I used to draw in little sketchbooks, is when I went to a big sketchbook, because
I agree.
You have to, like, I used to draw in these little, like, almost like 5x5 sketchbooks, and I went to the shitty Canson, not, if anybody from Canson's listening, I love your sketchbooks, but those like big black.
Yeah. I know exactly what I used to use those.
Yeah,
too.
and just like the paper's not great, and just like going there, like my work like totally transformed once I was not working so small.
Yeah. It's funny. I used to use those, and then I think over time I've like shrunken down more and more. There's a therapist would say something about that. There's something there where I've gotten like more and more closed off and like and you know, feeling small. But yeah, I have a stack of those from when I was a kid all the way through like college, and then I just kind of kept shrinking my little sketches more and more.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, that's all really good advice, and I think that's something people should definitely do more of, is just like loosen up, draw bigger, have more fun.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that, like, I don't know, that like we were talking about college and stuff. One thing that I am thankful for in my college education is that I like all the foundation teachers that I had would give that advice, like just keep drawing, no eraser. I had so many classes where like the erasers were basically prohibited. And yeah, drawing with pen and just moving on. I think this is
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I guess I'll end it here. The thing that's interesting that I've come to appreciate working at Netflix, seeing pitches come in, responding to pitches with the content teams. Again, they're leading those conversations. But I think like even on Instagram and Twitter, I think the people that with their art can just be authentic. Like, I think that's one of the things that Louis, even though everything Louis does, again, I don't mean to talk too much about Louis, but it's like, it's okay that it's not perfect. And it's just like, it's so authentic that it's just like, I'm putting it out there. This is who I am. I'm not trying to be something that I think other people want me to be. And again, I wish like I even self-censor. So it's not like I only post certain things, but not everything.
Sure. Well, that's
but fine. I feel like everybody, like, I feel like artists, if they're just like, you know what, I'm going to post scribbles, I'm going to post this weird thing that I drew versus like the perfect thing, I actually think they'd probably grow more.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I mean, that shouldn't be a goal, but it also does help, you know, the algorithm. Like you're putting more out there. And so it's just better. It's just better because you're kind of in front of people's eyes more. And so like, if that's your goal, then being looser and quicker is better, because you can produce more stuff.
But everybody has their own way. So it's like,
right.
Yeah.
Everybody has their own way. Yeah. My way has done well for me so far.
Totally,
for the most part, you know, it's just a little more taxing and it comes with its own baggage. But all of us have baggage.
So much baggage. So much
all
baggage.
Of us.
I mean,
all of us. No way is perfect. But anyway, so what are your goals kind of for the future, and what are you looking forward to in your career?
It's such a good question. You know, I think I'm really enjoying my time at Netflix. I think being kind of at the kind of forefront of interactive TV is super interesting, and it combines a lot of my passions.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, I could see myself being at Netflix and being very happy for quite some time. I think on a side projects, I have one project I've been working on that I'm trying to develop a website where people can collaborate on building fictional worlds.
Ooh, that's cool.
So think of like open source software, but open source IP development. So that's a side project.
That's so great.
Hey, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
That
so
sounds
we'll see.
great.
So working on that, and then I've been writing for the last couple of years and doodling stories from my childhood. And I don't know what they are, what they'll ever be. Maybe they'll be something. Maybe they're just for me. But I will continue. Like my hope is to publish something, self-publish, not real publish, something just to put out in the world in the next couple of years.
Cool.
Ooh.
That's great. Those are great projects.
Yeah.
The idea of an open world or an open source IP is fascinating because I think with the internet that's kind of becoming more and more of a thing.
All of the DM
and I feel like somebody just needs to break that. Somebody needs to like figure out a way to centralize it a little bit
and give people tools. Again, like
that's
my
great.
career is like this kind of weird space of like creative development, production, design, technology.
You're the guy to do it, man.
So again, it's like, interesting intersection of weirdness.
I love that. That's your career in a nutshell. Yeah. Well, cool. Thanks for coming on the show, man.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Oh, this was super fun. Again, I'm a big fan. I've listened to a bunch of these.
Oh, great.
That's so awesome. I'm so glad. I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah, I'm really happy. I'm glad people like them. We've been doing this for a while, and so it seems like people are enjoying them, which makes us happy.
Well, thank you so much. I super appreciate it.
That was such a fun episode too. Like I really enjoyed like listening to your whole journey. That was like a crazy ride.
Yeah. Well, that's the end of this creative block. Thanks to Dave for being our guest and sharing his story.
And thanks to your listeners. Follow us on Twitter. It's at Creative Block, creative without the vowels, where we ask for drawing prompts and questions to ask our guests. Huge thanks for my sister Clemens for editing the podcast.
Please subscribe to the channel if you love our content. I've been your host, Gene.
And I was B. Keep being creative, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.